The war had lasted 11 months, and the Valorian collective was dying. Ambassador Scythe stood at the observation window of the orbital station and watched another city burn on the planet below. The orange glow spread across the northern continent like a wound that would not heal. Somewhere down there, millions of her people were running, hiding, praying to gods who seemed to have abandoned them. The Krath Dominion had come without warning. One day, the collective had been a peaceful federation of 3 species living quiet lives among the stars. The next day, 400 warships had appeared at the edge of their territory, and the dying had begun. Scythe was old by her people's standards. She had served as ambassador to 12 different species over her long career. She had negotiated treaties, resolved disputes, and built friendships across the galaxy. None of it mattered now. None of her words had stopped the Krath. Nothing could stop the Krath. The Dominion was not interested in negotiation. They were not interested in trade or territory or political advantage. The Krath believed that conquest was holy. Their religion taught that the strong had a divine duty to crush the weak, and the Valorian collective was very, very weak. The last defensive fleet had fallen 3 weeks ago. Scythe still remembered watching the battle from this same window. 72 ships crewed by brave souls who knew they could not win but fought anyway. The Krath had destroyed them in less than an hour. Now there was nothing left between the Dominion and the homeworlds. Nothing but time, and time was running out. "Ambassador," said her aide, a young Valorian named Korath who still believed in miracles. "The council is asking for you. They want to discuss the surrender terms." Scythe did not turn from the window. "There will be no surrender terms. You know what the Krath do to conquered peoples." Korath was silent. Everyone knew. The Krath did not take slaves or demand tribute. They simply erased. Conquered species were eliminated completely, their worlds stripped of resources, their histories forgotten. In 100 years, it would be as if the Valorian collective had never existed. "Then what do we do?" Korath asked. Scythe finally turned from the window. Her old eyes were tired, but something flickered in them. Something that might have been hope or might have been madness. 30 years ago, she said, I met a human. Korath tilted his head in confusion. A human? The traders? Yes, they were passing through our territory on an exploration mission. Their captain was a woman named Chun. She was quiet, polite, and completely unremarkable. We shared a meal together, discussed trade routes, and exchanged gifts. Before she left, she gave me something. Scythe reached into her robe and pulled out a small device. It was simple in design, almost primitive looking. A metal cylinder with a single button. She told me it was an emergency beacon, Scythe continued. She said that if my people ever faced extinction, we should activate it. She said humans remember their friends. Korath stared at the device with obvious doubt. Ambassador, with respect, humans are a Tier 7 civilization. They have no significant military presence. They are traders and explorers. What could one human ship do against 400 Krath warships? Nothing, Scythe admitted. One human ship could do nothing. But we have tried everything else. We have begged the Galactic Assembly for intervention. We have offered everything we have to any species willing to help. No one is coming, Korath. No one wants to anger the Krath. So we are left with a 30-year-old promise from a species the galaxy considers irrelevant. She pressed the button. The device made no sound. No light appeared. For a long moment, nothing happened at all. Perhaps it is broken, Korath said gently. Perhaps, Scythe agreed. She set the beacon on the windowsill and returned her gaze to the burning world below. But at least we tried. 6 hours later, the Krath invasion fleet entered the Valorian home system. Scythe watched them come on the tactical display. 400 warships arranged in perfect formation, their hulls painted in the blood-red colors of the Dominion. At their head flew the flagship of High Conquest Lord Thrax, a vessel so large it could have held a small city. The transmission came through on all frequencies, as it always did. The Krath liked their enemies to know exactly what was about to happen. People of the Valorian Collective, Thrax's voice boomed through every speaker on every station and every planet. Your time has ended. Your species has been judged unworthy to exist. You have 6 hours to broadcast your complete and unconditional surrender. Your leaders will present themselves to me personally. Your populations will await processing. Any resistance will result in immediate orbital bombardment of civilian centers. This is not a negotiation. This is your final notice. The transmission ended. Across the collective, billions of people heard those words and knew they were listening to their death sentence. Saleith closed her eyes. In 6 hours, everything her people had built over 10,000 years would be gone. Their art, their music, their science, their dreams. All of it would be erased as if it had never been. Ambassador, Kurith said suddenly. His voice was strange. Something is happening. Saleith opened her eyes and looked at the tactical display. At the very edge of the system, a new contact had appeared. A single ship, dropping out of hyperspace. Identify, she ordered. The computer took a moment to analyze the vessel. When the results appeared, Saleith felt her heart stop. Vessel identification. Use patience classification. Unknown origin. United Earth Navy crew. Complement. Estimated 200 weapons. Unknown threat assessment. Minimal. A human ship, Korith whispered. They actually came. Saleith stared at the display in disbelief. One ship. The humans had sent one ship. Against 400 Krath warships, against the most feared military force in the quadrant, humanity had answered her call with a single vessel. She should have felt despair. She should have felt the last flicker of hope die inside her. Instead, she felt something else. Something she could not explain. The human captain from 30 years ago had looked her in the eyes and made a promise. Now, against all logic and reason, a human ship had come. Maybe it meant nothing. Maybe it was a fuel gesture, a symbolic act of friendship that would end in seconds when the Krath noticed the newcomer. But the humans had come. They had remembered. The Krath noticed the new arrival almost immediately. On the tactical display, Saleith watched as 12 interceptors broke formation and moved toward the human vessel at attack speed. The Krath are dispatching ships to intercept, Korith reported unnecessarily. The human vessel will be destroyed in minutes. Saleith said nothing. She watched the display and waited. A new transmission cut through the silence. It was broadcast on all frequencies, just as the Krath message had been, but the voice was different. It was calm, steady, and spoke in simple, clear words. Valorian Collective, this is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Navy vessel Patience. I am responding to your emergency beacon. Help has arrived. Please stand clear of Krath vessels. Stand clear? Saleith almost laughed at the absurdity. Stand clear of what? The human ship was about to be vaporized by 12 interceptors, and she was telling the Valorians to stand clear. But something in the captain's voice made Saleith hesitate. There was no fear in it. No desperation. No awareness that she was about to die. Captain Vasquez sounded like someone who knew exactly what was about to happen and was not worried about it at all. The Krath interceptors opened fire. The tactical display lit up with weapon signatures as 12 ships unleashed their full arsenals at the lone human vessel. Saleith watched the Patience. She expected to see it explode, to see its hull torn apart by enemy weapons, to see the last hope of her people die in a flash of light. Instead, she saw something impossible. The human ship moved. Not in any way Scythe understood. It did not accelerate or dodge or take evasive action. It simply was not where the weapons were aimed. Every shot passed through empty space. Every missile found nothing but vacuum. It was as if the patience existed slightly outside of reality, slipping between moments, occupying the spaces between seconds. And then the human ship fired back. Scythe would remember what happened next for the rest of her life. She would describe it to councils and assemblies and historians. She would try to find words for something that had no words. But in that moment, she simply watched in silence as the universe changed. The first interceptor came apart. Not in an explosion, but in a dissolution. Its hull, its weapons, its crew, everything that made it a ship simply stopped being solid. One moment it was there, and the next moment it was an expanding cloud of atoms drifting through space. The second interceptor followed. Then the third. Then all of them at once. 53 seconds after the battle began, it was over. 12 Krath warships had been reduced to nothing. Not debris, not wreckage, nothing. Just clouds of disassociated matter spreading slowly through the void. The tactical display updated. Where 12 contacts had been, there were now 0. The Patience continued its approach toward the Krath fleet, undamaged, unhurried. Korath made a sound that might have been a prayer or might have been a scream. Scythe could not blame him. She was feeling something similar. Captain Vasquez's voice came through the speakers again, still calm, still steady. Krath Dominion Commander, you have attacked a vessel of the United Earth Navy. You will withdraw from this system, IMD. High Conquest Lord Thrax had never known fear. His species did not believe in fear. Fear was for the weak, for the conquered, for the species that existed only to be crushed beneath the boots of the Krath Dominion. Thrax had personally overseen the extinction of 11 civilizations. He had watched worlds burn and felt nothing but satisfaction at a holy duty fulfilled. But as he stared at the tactical display on his flagship, watching the empty space where 12 of his interceptors had been moments ago, he felt something cold crawling up his spine. Something he did not recognize. Report, he growled at his tactical officer. What happened to our ships? The officer's hands trembled over his console. Unknown, my lord. They simply ceased to exist. All 12 vessels, destroyed in less than 1 minute. We detected no conventional weapons fire. No missiles, no energy beams, nothing we can identify. That is impossible, Thrax said. Yes, my lord. And yet it happened. Thrax turned his attention to the human vessel still moving slowly toward his fleet. It was not a large ship. By Krath standards, it was barely worth noticing. His flagship alone could have held 100 vessels that size. And yet that tiny ship had just done something his entire fleet could not explain. The transmission from the human captain still echoed in his mind. She had given him 30 seconds to withdraw. 20 of those seconds had already passed. In 10 more seconds, he would need to make a decision. Withdrawal was not an option. The Krath did not retreat. The Krath had never retreated in their entire history. To withdraw would be to admit weakness, and weakness was the greatest sin in their religion. Thrax would rather die than order his fleet to run from a single enemy ship. Besides, it was just one ship. Whatever weapon it possessed, however impressive that first demonstration had been, it was still alone against 400 warships. Numbers had to count for something. They always had before. All ships, Thrax ordered, his voice carrying across every vessel in his fleet. Target the human vessel. Full attack. Destroy it completely. The Krath fleet moved as one. 400 warships turned their weapons toward the Patience and opened fire. The amount of energy released in that moment was almost beyond calculation. Thousands of weapons, from plasma cannons to particle beams to antimatter missiles, all focused on a single target. The space around the human ship became a storm of destruction. Nothing could survive such an assault. Nothing had ever survived such an assault. And yet the patience was not there. Captain Elena Vasquez sat in her command chair and watched the incoming fire with the calm expression of someone observing a particularly interesting weather pattern. Around her, her crew moved with quiet efficiency, their hands dancing over consoles that displayed information in ways no other species in the galaxy would understand. "Invasion protocol active," her tactical officer reported. "Enemy fire is passing through our previous positions. No impacts." "Good," Vasquez said. "Begin response pattern Delta. Disable their weapons and engines. Keep life support intact." "Understood, Captain." To the craft watching from their ships, what happened next looked like something from a nightmare. The human vessel seemed to split into a dozen copies of itself, each one moving in a different direction, each one striking a different target. In reality, the Patience was moving faster than their sensors could track, appearing in multiple places within the same fraction of a second. The first craft warship lost its weapons. Every cannon, every missile tube, every defensive system simply vanished, removed with surgical precision that left the rest of the hull untouched. Before the crew could even register what had happened, their engines went dead as well. The ship drifted, helpless but alive. The second ship followed, then the third, then 10 more, then 50. On the flagship, Thrax watched his tactical display with growing horror. His ships were being dismantled like toys in the hands of a careless child. The human vessel moved through his fleet like a ghost, appearing and disappearing, leaving crippled warships in its wake. And it was not even trying to kill them. That was the part that terrified Thrax most. The human ship had the power to destroy his entire fleet, just as it had destroyed those first 12 interceptors. Instead, it was carefully, methodically disabling each vessel without causing a single death. This was not a battle. This was a demonstration. "Fire everything!" Thrax screamed. "All weapons, continuous fire. Hit that ship!" His fleet obeyed. The space around the Patience filled with so much weapons fire that the stars themselves seemed to disappear behind walls of energy. Surely no vessel, no matter how advanced, could dodge an assault of this magnitude. The Patience dodged it anyway. It moved through the storm of destruction like water flowing around stones, never touched, never threatened. And it continued its work of disabling ship after ship after ship. 87 seconds into the engagement, Thrax made a decision that would have been unthinkable 5 minutes earlier. He opened a channel to his entire fleet. "All ships," he said, his voice hollow. "Retreat. Full withdrawal. Get out of this system now." The reaction was immediate and chaotic. Craft warships broke formation and fled in every direction, their crews abandoning all pretense of military discipline in their desperation to escape. Some headed for the system's edge. Others tried to hide behind planets and moons. A few attempted to surrender, cutting their engines and broadcasting messages of capitulation. The Patience stopped its attack. Captain Vasquez watched the fleeing ships on her display and nodded slowly. "Open a channel," she ordered. "All frequencies." Her communications officer complied, and Vasquez spoke to the panicked craft fleet. "All craft vessels, halt your engines and await further instructions. Any ship that continues to flee will be disabled. You will not be harmed if you surrender. This is your only warning." About half the ships stopped. Their crews, faced with a choice between certain destruction and uncertain survival, chose to take their chances with surrender. These vessels cut their engines and drifted in place, waiting to see what the humans would do. The other half kept running. They could not accept surrender. Their religion, their culture, Their entire understanding of the universe told them that death was preferable to submission. So they ran, pushing their engines to maximum, praying to gods of conquest that they might escape. Vasquez sighed. She had hoped it would not come to this. Disable the runners, she ordered. Same protocols. No casualties if possible. The patients moved again. It took 4 minutes to catch every fleeing ship. 4 minutes to carefully remove the engines and weapons from vessels that were trying desperately to escape. It was not a battle. It was more like a parent catching runaway children. Firm, but not cruel. When it was over, the entire Krath invasion fleet drifted helplessly in Valorian space. 400 warships, the pride of the Dominion, reduced to harmless hulks without a single life lost. Captain Vasquez leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes for a moment. She was tired. She was always tired after engagements like this. Not from the physical effort, but from the emotional weight of what she had to do. Send a message to the Valorian government, she said. Tell them the threat has been neutralized. Tell them we need to talk. On the Valorian orbital station, Ambassador Salaith had watched the entire battle in stunned silence. Her staff had gathered around the tactical display, and no one had spoken a word for the full duration of the engagement. There was nothing to say. What they were witnessing was beyond anything their experience could explain. When the last Krath ship was disabled, and the patients finally came to rest in the center of the defeated fleet, Korath turned to Salaith with tears in his eyes. How? He asked. How is this possible? Who are these humans? What are they? Salaith shook her head slowly. I do not know, but I intend to find out. The message from Captain Vasquez arrived moments later, requesting a meeting aboard the Patience. Salaith agreed immediately. She had 1,000 questions, and she suspected that the answers would change everything she thought she knew about the galaxy. The shuttle ride to the human ship was short. Salaith spent most of it staring out the window at the drifting Krath warships. She could see their crews through the viewports, Krath warriors sitting in darkness, their weapons gone, their engines dead, their pride shattered. They were alive, which was more mercy than they had ever shown anyone else. The Patience loomed ahead, and Salaith studied it with new eyes. It looked so ordinary. No strange alien architecture, no glowing weapons, no obvious signs of the terrible power it contained. It looked like exactly what the galaxy had always believed humans to be. Unremarkable, average, beneath notice. The shuttle docked, and Salaith walked through the airlock into the human vessel. The interior was surprisingly warm and welcoming. Soft lighting, comfortable temperatures, artwork on the walls. It felt less like a warship and more like a home. Captain Vasquez was waiting for her. She was a woman of middle years, with dark hair streaked with gray and eyes that had seen too much. She wore a simple uniform with no medals or decorations. When she smiled, it was the smile of someone who was genuinely glad to meet a friend. Ambassador Salaith, Vasquez said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. Thank you for coming. I apologize that we could not arrive sooner. We came as quickly as we could. Salaith took the offered hand and felt the warmth of human skin against her own. Such and Captain Vasquez refilled their cups of tea before she began speaking. Salaith waited patiently, understanding that some stories needed time to be told properly. 300 years ago, Vasquez said, humanity almost destroyed itself. We had wars that killed hundreds of millions. We poisoned our own planet. We came within a hair of extinction, not from aliens or natural disasters, but from our own stupidity and rage. When we finally crawled out of that darkness, we made some decisions about what kind of species we wanted to be. She looked at Salaith with eyes that seemed much older than her face. We decided that we never wanted to fight another war if we could avoid it. We decided that peace was more valuable than glory, and survival was more important than pride. But we also understood something else. We understood that the universe does not care about peaceful intentions. There would always be species like the Krath out there, species that saw kindness as weakness and mercy as an invitation to attack. Saleith nodded slowly. Her own people had learned that lesson the hard way. So we prepared, Vasquez continued. For 3 centuries, humanity has been quietly building the most advanced military force in the galaxy. We developed technologies that no one else has even imagined. We trained crews who could operate those technologies with perfect precision. We built ships like the Patience, ships that could take on entire fleets and win. But no one knows this, Saleith said. The galaxy thinks humans are a minor species. Everyone believes you are weak. That was intentional, Vasquez said. We studied history, both our own and the histories of other galactic civilizations. We noticed a pattern. Whenever a species rises to great power and announces that power to the galaxy, they spend the next several centuries fighting. Other species attack them out of fear or jealousy or simple greed. Alliances form against them. Wars drain their resources and kill their people. Even if they win, they lose. She set down her cup and leaned forward. So we chose a different path. We decided to hide our strength. We became traders and explorers. We made friends everywhere we went. We helped where we could, always quietly, never asking for credit. We let the galaxy believe we were unremarkable. And for 300 years, it worked. No one attacked us because no one thought we were worth attacking. No one feared us because no one thought we were dangerous. Saleith felt her understanding of the galaxy shifting beneath her. Everything she had believed about power and politics was being rewritten. But you came when we called, she said. You revealed yourself to save us. Yes, Vasquez said simply. Because some things matter more than secrecy. Captain Chun made you a promise, and we keep our promises. Your people were facing extinction, and we had the power to stop it. What kind of monsters would we be if we let you die to protect our hidden advantage? Saleith was quiet for a long moment. Through the window of the conference room, she could see the drifting hulks of the Krath fleet. 400 warships, the terror of the quadrant, rendered harmless by a single human vessel. How many ships like the Patience does humanity have? She asked. Vasquez smiled slightly. Enough. That is not an answer. No, it is not. But some secrets we must keep, even from friends. I can tell you this much. The Patience is not our most powerful ship. It is not even close. It is what we call a rapid response vessel, designed for exactly this type of situation. Fast, flexible, capable of operating alone in hostile territory. Saleith tried to imagine what a human fleet battle group might look like if the Patience was just a small example of their capability. The image that formed in her mind was terrifying. Why mercy? She asked suddenly. You could have destroyed the Krath fleet completely. You could have killed every warrior in those ships. Instead, you disabled them carefully, keeping everyone alive. Why? Vasquez's expression grew sad. Because we have done enough killing. Our history is soaked in blood, Ambassador. We spent thousands of years hurting each other in every way imaginable. When we finally stopped, when we finally built something better, we swore that we would never kill again unless there was absolutely no other choice. She looked out the window at the defeated fleet. Those Krath warriors out there are someone's children. Someone's partners, someone's friends. They were taught to believe in conquest and cruelty, but that does not mean they cannot learn something better. If we killed them, we would become what we hate. We would prove that violence is the only answer. Instead, we showed them something they have never seen before. We showed them mercy. Saleith felt tears forming in her eyes. Her people had spent 11 months being slaughtered by the Krath. They had lost millions of lives to an enemy that showed no compassion, no restraint, no basic decency. And now Human was telling her that even those monsters deserved a chance at redemption. It was almost too much to process. "What happens now?" she asked. Vasquez leaned back in her chair. "Now we have some difficult decisions to make. The galaxy has seen what happened here. Every species with a sensor array has recordings of the battle. By tomorrow, everyone will know that humanity is not what they thought we were. That will change everything," Salaith said. "Yes, we knew it would happen eventually. We could not hide forever. We just hope to have more time," Vasquez sighed. "Now we need to figure out how to handle the attention. We do not want an empire. We do not want to rule the galaxy or impose our will on other species. We just want to live in peace and help our friends when they need us." "The other powers will be afraid of you," Salaith said. "They will see you as a threat." "Some will," Vasquez agreed. "Others might see an opportunity. We will need to be very careful in how we present ourselves. We need to show the galaxy that our power is not a threat to anyone who means no harm." Salaith thought about this. She thought about how her own people would react to the revelation that humans had been hiding such incredible strength. She thought about how other species would respond. Fear, suspicion, jealousy, greed. The galaxy was about to become a very complicated place. "I can help," she said. "My people owe you our existence. The Valorian Collective will stand with humanity. We will tell everyone what you did here, how you came when no one else would, how you showed mercy to your enemies. We will help the galaxy understand who you really are." Vasquez smiled warmly. "Thank you, Ambassador. That means more than you know." While they talked, the news spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. On 100 worlds, military leaders watched recordings of the battle in stunned silence. They analyzed every second of footage, trying to understand how a single vessel had defeated 400 warships. They ran simulations and calculations. They consulted their best scientists and their most experienced admirals, and they all reached the same conclusion. It should have been impossible. The human ship had moved in ways that violated known physics. Its weapons had destroyed matter at a molecular level, something that required energy outputs far beyond anything their technology could produce. The precision of its attacks suggested computing power and sensor capability generations ahead of galactic standards. Humanity was not a Tier 7 civilization. Humanity was not even on the scale. They had been pretending, hiding, watching from the shadows while the rest of the galaxy fought and bled and struggled. And now everyone knew. On the Krath homeworld, the High Council met in emergency session. The loss of the invasion fleet was catastrophic enough, but the implications were even worse. For centuries, the Dominion had believed itself invincible. Their entire religion was built on the idea that conquest was divine, that military might determined worth, that the strong had a duty to crush the weak. But the humans were stronger, infinitely stronger. And instead of crushing the Krath, they had shown mercy. For a species that defined itself by conquest, this was an existential crisis. If the Krath were not the strongest, then everything they believed was wrong. If mercy was more powerful than cruelty, then their entire civilization was built on a lie. The arguments in the council chamber lasted for days. Some demanded immediate retaliation, insisting that the Dominion must prove its strength or be seen as weak. Others pointed out the obvious fact that retaliation would be suicide. A few, speaking carefully and quietly, suggested that perhaps the humans had shown them something important. Perhaps strength was not about killing. Perhaps there was another way. In the Galactic Assembly, representatives of 100 species gathered to discuss the human situation. The debates were heated and often contradictory. Some demanded that humanity be contained, their expansion limited, their ships monitored. Others argued for alliance, pointing out that having the humans as friends was clearly better than having them as enemies. A few older representatives, those who remembered first contact with humanity decades ago, spoke of quiet kindnesses and unexpected help. They talked about human traders who gave fair prices and human explorers who shared their maps freely. They recalled humans who had risked their own ships to rescue strangers in distress, asking nothing in return. The picture that emerged was not of a dangerous predator hiding among them, but of a protective guardian who had simply been waiting to be needed. Humanity had power beyond imagination, and they had used it for 3 weeks after the battle. The craft Dominion was falling apart. High Conquest Lord Thrax had been stripped of his rank and confined to quarters on his own flagship, which still drifted helplessly in Valorian space. The human vessel Patience remained nearby, a silent guardian ensuring that the defeated fleet caused no more trouble. Thrax spent his days staring at the wall of his cabin, trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong. His entire life had been built on certainty. The strong conquered the weak. The worthy destroyed the unworthy. These were the foundations of Krath society, the bedrock of their religion, the principles that had guided their species for 1,000 years. And in 53 seconds, a single human ship had proven all of it wrong. The humans were stronger than the Krath. That much was undeniable. By every measure of power that the Dominion had ever used, humanity was superior. They should have done what any proper conqueror would do. They should have destroyed the Krath fleet, bombarded the homeworld, and erased the Dominion from existence. Instead, they had offered mercy. They had disabled the fleet without killing anyone. They had provided food and medical supplies to the stranded crews. They had even sent counselors to help warriors deal with the psychological shock of defeat. Mercy from the strong. It was the one thing Krath philosophy had never considered. Back on the homeworld, the political situation was chaos. The ruling council had split into 3 factions that could not agree on anything. The traditionalists insisted that the Dominion must continue its sacred mission of conquest, no matter the cost. They called for building new fleets, developing new weapons, finding some way to challenge human supremacy. The pragmatists pointed out that challenging humanity was suicide. They had seen the battle recordings. They understood that the Patience was just one ship, and that humanity apparently had thousands more like it. Any attempt at military resistance would result in extinction. The only sensible path was surrender. But it was the third faction that was growing fastest, and their ideas were the most unsettling of all. They called themselves the Reformers. They were mostly younger Krath, warriors who had seen the battle recordings and asked questions that their elders found disturbing. If humanity was the strongest species in the galaxy, and humanity chose mercy over conquest, then perhaps strength was not about killing at all. Perhaps the Krath had been wrong about everything. The reformer movement spread through the Dominion like wildfire. In military academies, young officers debated the meaning of true power. In temples, priests struggled to reconcile their teachings with what had happened. In homes and gathering places, ordinary Krath asked each other the question that had never been asked before. What if we stopped conquering? The human embassy in Valorian space found itself overwhelmed with requests. Krath representatives wanted to talk, to understand, to learn. They asked questions about human history, human philosophy, human society. They wanted to know how humanity had become so powerful and why. They had chosen to use that power for protection instead of domination. Captain Vasquez found herself spending less time on the bridge and more time in conference rooms, explaining things she had never expected to explain. She told the Krath about Earth's bloody history, about the wars and the genocides and the moments when her species had nearly destroyed itself. She told them about the slow, painful process of building something better, about the generations of work it had taken to change their nature. "We are not born peaceful," she said to a group of Krath officers who had requested a meeting. "We are born with the same instincts as any other species. We can be cruel, selfish, violent, and destructive. What makes us different is that we chose to be something else. We looked at what we were and decided we did not like it. So we changed. But the change is not complete," one of the officers said. "You still have weapons. You still have warriors." "Yes," Vasquez agreed, "because not everyone in the galaxy has made the same choice we have. We would love to live in a universe where no one needed weapons. But until that universe exists, we must be ready to protect those who cannot protect themselves." The officer considered this for a long moment. "When you came to save the Valorians," he said slowly, "you could have killed us all. You could have destroyed our entire fleet and felt justified in doing so. We were there to commit genocide. By our own laws, you would have been right to answer in kind." "Yes," Vasquez said. "We could have, but you did not." "No. Why?" Vasquez was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. "Because killing is easy," she said finally. "It takes no imagination, no creativity, no courage. Anyone can destroy. But building something new, giving someone a chance to be better than they were, showing mercy when vengeance would be simpler and more satisfying, that is hard. That requires strength of a different kind." She looked at the Krath officer with steady eyes. "You came here to conquer and destroy. Now you are here asking questions and trying to understand. In a few weeks, you have traveled further than many species travel in centuries. That suggests to me that the Krath are capable of change, if they choose to be. The question is, what do you choose?" Meanwhile, the ripples of the battle continued to spread across the galaxy. On dozens of worlds, species that had long been afraid of the Krath began to breathe easier. They had lived for generations under the shadow of Dominion expansion, knowing that someday the conquerors might turn their attention in their direction. Now that shadow had lifted. The Krath were not going to conquer anyone ever again. But more than relief, what people felt was curiosity. Everyone wanted to know more about the humans. Who were they really? How had they hidden such incredible power for so long? What did they want? The human government on Earth had anticipated this reaction and prepared for it carefully. They released statements emphasizing their peaceful intentions. They opened channels for diplomatic communication with any species that wanted to talk. They made it clear that they had no interest in conquest or domination. But words could only do so much. What really convinced the galaxy was what the humans did. In the Velthric system, a mining colony was hit by an asteroid impact that devastated half the planet. Within hours, human rescue ships arrived, bringing supplies, medical teams, and construction equipment. They asked for nothing in return. Near the border of the consortium of allied worlds, a refugee fleet carrying survivors of a civil war was running out of fuel and food. Human ships intercepted them, refueled their vessels, restocked their supplies, and escorted them to safety. Again, they asked for nothing. On the frontier of explored space, a research station sent out a distress call when their life support systems failed. A human exploration vessel diverted from its mission and arrived in time to save everyone aboard. The human captain offered to help repair their systems before continuing on his way. Again and again, across the galaxy, humans appeared when they were needed and helped when they could. They did not demand payment or political concessions or strategic advantages. They just helped. For species accustomed to transactional relationships, this was deeply confusing. Surely the humans wanted something. Surely there was some hidden agenda, some long-term plan that would eventually reveal itself. No one was that generous without expecting something in return. But as weeks turned into months, and the humans continued to simply help without apparent ulterior motive. A different possibility began to emerge. Maybe the humans meant exactly what they said. Maybe they really did just want to live in peace and help their friends. This was, in some ways, more unsettling than hidden aggression would have been. An enemy with a secret plan could be understood and prepared against. But a genuinely benevolent superpower? That was something the galaxy had never seen before. No one knew quite how to respond. On Earth, the reaction to the revelation of human power was surprisingly muted. Most humans had known, at least in general terms, that their military was far more capable than the galaxy realized. It was not a secret kept from the population, just from outside observers. What concerned many humans was what would happen now that the secret was out. Would other species see them as a threat? Would they face constant challenges from those who wanted to test their strength? Would the peace they had worked so hard to build be undermined by fear and suspicion? The government moved quickly to address these concerns. They organized cultural exchange programs to bring citizens from other worlds to Earth, to show them what human society was really like. They invited foreign observers to visit human ships and installations, within reasonable security limits, to see that there was no massive military buildup aimed at conquest. They made every effort to be transparent about their intentions. Some people objected. Why reveal anything? Why give potential enemies any information at all? Better to maintain the mystery, keep everyone guessing, preserve the advantage of uncertainty. But the leadership argued that trust could not be built on secrecy. If humanity wanted to be accepted as a force for good in the galaxy, they needed to prove it through openness and action. The age of hiding was over. Now was the time to step forward and show the galaxy what humanity really stood for. Captain Vasquez, when she finally returned to Earth after months of diplomatic work, was asked by reporters what she thought of the situation. "I think we are at a turning point. A year after the battle, the galaxy had transformed. The Krath Dominion no longer existed. In its place stood something called the Krath Commonwealth, a federation of worlds that had rejected the old ways of conquest and embraced something entirely new. The transition had not been easy. There had been violence, civil conflict, and moments when it seemed like the whole society would tear itself apart. But the reformers had prevailed, and the Krath were slowly learning what it meant to build instead of destroy. Ambassador Saleth had become the most sought-after diplomat in the galaxy. Species that had never spoken to the Valorians before now requested meetings, wanting to hear firsthand what had happened in that star system, wanting to understand the humans through the eyes of someone they had saved. Saleth told the story again and again, each time finding new meaning in the events she had witnessed. She spoke of the desperate call, the lone ship appearing at the edge of the system, the impossible battle that lasted less than a minute. She described the mercy shown to defeated enemies, the patient explanations of human philosophy, the genuine kindness of Captain Vasquez and her crew. But mostly she spoke of hope. She told other species that change was possible, that even the cruelest cultures could learn better ways, that the galaxy did not have to be defined by fear and violence. She pointed to the Krath Commonwealth as proof that no one was beyond redemption. The humans, for their part, continued doing what they had always done. They explored and traded and helped where they could. The only difference was that now they did it openly, without pretending to be less than they were. Their ships traveled freely through galactic space, welcomed almost everywhere, feared only by those who had something to hide. Some species still viewed humanity with suspicion. They could not believe that such power came without ambition, that such strength was not aimed at dominance. They watched and waited for the humans to reveal their true intentions, to finally make their move toward galactic conquest. That move never came. Instead, the humans built hospitals on worlds ravaged by disease. They sent engineers to repair failing infrastructure. They shared technologies that improved the lives of billions. They trained teachers and doctors and scientists from dozens of species, asking nothing in return except that the knowledge be passed on to others. The Galactic Assembly, once a place of endless argument and political maneuvering, began to function as something like a real community. With the constant threat of Krath expansion gone, and with human arbitrators available to help resolve disputes peacefully, old enemies found ways to become neighbors. Trade flourished. Cultural exchange programs brought species into contact that had never communicated before. It was not perfect. The galaxy was too big and too diverse for perfect harmony. There were still conflicts, still misunderstandings, still moments when violence seemed inevitable. But more often than not, someone would step in to help. Sometimes it was a human ship. Sometimes it was another species that had learned from human example. The pattern of intervention and assistance spread, becoming normal, becoming expected. Captain Elena Vasquez retired on a spring morning, 18 months after the battle that had changed everything. She had served in the United Earth Navy for 32 years. She had commanded 6 different ships and participated in more operations than she could count. She had saved lives and taken them, though far fewer of the latter than she sometimes remembered in her dreams. Her retirement ceremony was small and private, just as she wanted it. Her crew, her family, a few close friends. No politicians, no journalists, no grand speeches. She said goodbye to the patients, walking through the corridors one last time, touching the walls of the ship that had been her home. Her replacement was a young captain named Rodriguez, an eager officer who had watched the recordings of the Valorian battle hundreds of times. He promised to take care of the ship and its crew. Vasquez believed him. After the ceremony, she took a shuttle down to the surface of Earth. She had purchased a small house on the coast of what had once been Spain. A white building overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. Her daughter Maria was waiting for her, along with 2 grandchildren who barely knew their grandmother and were excited to change that. For the first few weeks, Vasquez did not know what to do with herself. She had spent her entire adult life in service, and the sudden absence of duty left her feeling lost. She wandered the house, stared at the sea, and tried to remember what civilians did with their time. Slowly, she found her rhythm. She discovered that she enjoyed gardening. The tomatoes grew well in the Mediterranean climate, and there was something satisfying about nurturing life after spending so many years dealing with death. She learned to cook the local dishes, spending hours in the kitchen preparing meals for her family. She read books, real paper books, sitting in the shade of an olive tree while the afternoon sun moved across the sky. And sometimes, late at night, she received visitors. Ambassadors and diplomats from a dozen species made the journey to her small house by the sea. They came to ask advice, to hear her perspective on galactic affairs, to understand the philosophy that had guided her decisions in that crucial moment. Vasquez welcomed them all, serving tea on her small terrace, talking until the stars came out. One evening, almost 2 years after the battle, she received a visitor she had not expected. He was a Krath, one of the officers who had been aboard the flagship when it was disabled. He had spent months in human custody before being released to the Commonwealth, and he had spent the time since then thinking about what had happened. His name was Korath, and he had traveled all the way to Earth to ask one question. Vasquez met him on the terrace, pouring tea while the sun set over the sea. They sat in comfortable silence for a long time before Korath finally spoke. "I have studied human philosophy," he said. "I have read your histories, your religious texts, your ethical debates. I understand, intellectually, why you showed mercy that day, but I still do not understand it in my heart. I still do not feel it." Vasquez nodded slowly. "What is your question?" "How do you let go of the anger?" Korath asked. My people killed millions of Valorians. We came to their system to destroy them completely. By any measure of justice, you would have been right to kill us all. But you did not. You chose mercy. How did you do that? How did you look at us, knowing what we had done, and decide that we deserved to live? Vasquez was quiet for a long moment. She looked out at the sea, at the peaceful water that had witnessed so much human history, so much human violence and redemption. I did not decide that you deserved to live, she said finally. I decided that killing you would not undo what you had done. The Valorians who died would still be dead. The destruction would still have happened. The only question was what happened next. She turned to face the Krath officer. When I looked at your fleet, I saw two possibilities. I could destroy you, and nothing would change. Your people would learn that violence was answered with violence, that might made right, that the strong crushed the weak. Or I could show you something different. I could demonstrate that there was another way, that strength did not require cruelty, that mercy was possible even when vengeance was justified. She paused. I chose the second path because I believed it might lead somewhere better. I think it has. Korath was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. I have spent my whole life being told that weakness is the greatest sin, that compassion is foolishness, that the only path to greatness is through conquest. And then you came, and in 53 seconds, you proved that everything I believed was wrong. He looked at Vasquez with something like gratitude. You did not just save the Valorians that day. You saved us. You gave us a chance to become something better than what we were. My people are struggling with that gift. We do not know how to be anything other than conquerors. But we are trying. Because of what you did, we are trying. Vasquez reached across the table and placed her hand on his. That is all anyone can ask, she said. That you try. Later that night, after Korath had returned to his ship and departed for Krath space, Vasquez sat alone on her terrace. The stars were brilliant overhead, and she found herself looking at them the way she used to look at them from the Bridge of the Patience. Out there, somewhere, was the Valorian system where everything had changed. Out there were 1,000 worlds she had visited and 1,000 more she had never seen. Her communicator chimed softly. She glanced at it and smiled. A message from Captain Rodriguez, reporting that the Patience had responded to a distress call near the consortium border. A freighter had lost power and the crew was stranded. The Patience had arrived in time, made repairs, and escorted the vessel to safety. Routine work. No combat, no drama, just help where it was needed. Just as it should be. Vasquez closed her eyes and listened to the sound of the sea. She thought about the Valorians and the Krath and all the other species out there, finding their way towards something better. She thought about her grandchildren sleeping inside the house, growing up in a galaxy that was a little safer, a little kinder.